American Indian Movement, Militant American Indian Civil Rights Organization, founded in Minneapolis, Minnesota, 1968 by Dennis Banks, Clyde Belcourt, Eddie Benton Benai, and George Mitchell. AIM is initially formed to address American Indian sovereignty, treaty issues spiritually and leadership, while simultaneously addressing incidents of police harassment and racism against Native Americans forced to move away from reservations and tribal culture. By the 1950s era's enforcement of the U.S. federal government enforced Indian termination policies originally created in the 1930s. Malcolm X often referred to the human rights struggles of Native Americans in his speeches and in his autobiography. One big problem of the American Indian movement was the walleye fishing. The Mille Lacs Lake in central Minnesota has been a hotspot for the walleye fishing for the Native American. Like an urban American Indian version of the Black Panthers formed by African American social activists, AIM initially addressed civil rights violations but later broadened its scope to on February 27, 1973, at large public meeting of 600 Indians at Calico Hall organized by Pedro Bissonette of Oglala Sioux Civil Rights Organization, also known as OSCRO, and addressed by AIM leaders Banks and Russell Means, demands were made for investigations into vigilante incidents and for hearings on their treaties and permission given by the tribal elders to make a stand at Wounded Knee. The Wounded Knee incident began on February 27, 1973, when approximately 200 Oglala Lakota and followers of the American Indian movement seized and occupied the town of Wounded Knee, South Dakota, on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. The protests followed the failure of an effort of the Oglala Sioux Civil Rights Organization to impeach tribal president Richard Wilson, whom they accused of corruption and abuse of opponents. Additionally, protesters attacked the United States government's failure to fulfill treaties with Indian people and demanded the reopening of treaty negotiations. The occupation attracted wide media coverage, especially after the press accompanied with two U.S. senators from South Dakota to Wounded Knee. The event electrified American Indians who were inspired by the sight of their people standing in defiance of the government which had so often failed them. The murder rate after the war averaged 56.7 people per 100,000. Detroit had a rate of 20.2 per 100,000. More than 60 opponents of the tribal government died violently during this period, including Pedro Bissonette, Executive Director OSCRO. AIM representative said many were unsolved murders, but in 2002 the FBI